Well, the Bear Jew will make his return to the Octagon September 4th against an old familiar face, the Mauler, as Alexander Gustafsson will go back down to 205 pounds after coming out of retirement, a short-lived retirement, and losing subsequently a couple of times. Last loss to Fabricio Verdum at heavyweight, actually. Drake, this is a matchup I did not expect to see. Does this make sense? Like, is this... I don't know how to feel about this one. You have a former title contender who, gave John Jones one of the toughest fights of his career when Jones was in his prime. And he's had a really bad go of it, as of late, especially. I don't know. It doesn't, to me, and I don't want to get your thoughts on this. To me, this doesn't seem like, oh man, like Alexander Gustafsson's back. Like, awesome. Like, he doesn't seem like he has that name power anymore, almost, right? What are your thoughts on all this?
I completely agree with that. Unfortunately, because man, I do love me some Gustafsson, man. He is one of my favorite light heavyweights of all time, but man, it's been a sad run to watch it after, he finally got to that point with Jones. Ever since then, it's been sadness, really. So I'm very excited to see him back. But no, I completely agree. And I think it's partly because he's just gone away ever since the rematch. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd say the rematch more so because he was kind of got quiet after becoming bigger, and then after the Rumble loss, and then the DC fight is kind of when he started to stay away from media a bit, but then really is just does his own thing now out in Sweden, which props to him. That's if you're lucky if you can do that. Some people aren't able just to live by themselves pretty much. So it's good for him, but yeah, it definitely doesn't help. And I think people probably are like, oh, he still fights. Like, you kind of forget that he has fought every year though, since what do we got? Going back a long time. See, that's the thing, is it feels like he has missed years, but he fights every year still, which is very bizarre. In this fight though, with Paul Craig, it feels similar to that weirdness of like Luke versus Blachowicz, Rockhold versus Blachowicz. You're like, all right, I didn't see that one coming. It's cool, I guess. It's very weird. But and you initially asked to like, does this fight make sense? And at this stage, I think so. I think maybe even not, in terms of, you look at Paul Craig's record specifically, he actually hasn't lost in his last 5 fights. He's on a pretty good roll right here. Whereas that's the opposite with Gustafsson, and he even went up. So he's kind of all over the place and probably should be fighting somebody lower down if he's going to come back, because the name doesn't feel there for us, but it still is there, which is why Craig's, going to take a fight like this now, despite the role that he is on. But man, at this stage, I'm afraid that it's going to be sadder, which I can't believe I'm saying that. I feel like Paul Craig is a dangerous fight for Alexander Gustafsson. I do also love the Bear Jew versus the Mauler. That's great though.
Can't get a better nickname fight. It's hard pressed to.
Sweden versus Scotland. I mean, this is good. It's good stuff. But yeah, I'm worried, man, because you look at 3 losses in a row for Gus, which is weird also, but like his last 2 were by submission. Paul Craig's pretty darn good at those. So if it goes to the ground, he's gonna put some danger in Alex's favor, or not in his favor, however you want to say that. But then on the feet should be pretty fun. But we know that Gustafsson historically is a phenomenal striker, but Paul can crack. So I think it's a fun fight, but it's very weird. I'm very mixed emotions all over the place, but I accept it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's, when you look at this fight, it's one of those things where I would agree that I think this is a bad matchup for the Mauler. I think it's bad because that's really Paul Craig's world. Yes, Paul Craig can get cracked, right? That's really his biggest weakness, is that his chin, You touch his chin right, he's gone. But if it goes to the ground, which almost inevitably always does with Paul Craig, like he gets you in submissions. I mean, many a time before this 5-fight win streak, you had him get the crap beat out of him, and then last minute he'd throw up a submission against Ankalaev, Kennedy. I'm gonna butcher his name, Ninjaku. Yeah. That's terrible. There you go. This is Paul Craig's world, and Gustafsson's ground game has not looked good his last 2 times out. And I don't think he necessarily has the knockout power that he once did when he was younger either, right? I think that's a big part of it. And it's tough to see him fall off this cliff, a proverbial cliff, I guess, because, he bounced back after he loses to Rumble, and then he loses that split against Cormier in a just crazy fight where he was, again, this close to champion. He goes on to, maul Glover Teixeira and current champion Jan Blachowicz. And so then he proceeds to lose to Jones in the rematch and just look awful his next 2 times out. And maybe he's thinking he can go back down to light heavyweight because he's beaten the now champion, which he dominated that fight. He could just control that fight from start to finish. But I just don't think it makes sense for either guy. I think if you're Gus, you try and get a bigger name fight to get back in there so you could make a quick run back to the title. And if you're Paul Craig, you're on a 5-fight win streak. Why are you, because you had the draw. So I think it's a 3-fight win streak, but you haven't lost in your last 5 fights. Why are you not angling for a ranked opponent above you to try and go up the rankings? This is a name, but it's not going to propel him up the rankings like it used to, especially with Gus having lost so poorly his last couple times out. I don't get the matchmaking here at all. Unless it's just a money thing or something for both guys, but it's, this is going to be sad. I really hope it's a good showing for both guys. That's my real hope for this matchup, because, I think Paul Craig, if he can continue to put things together and be more on the defensive, right? Jamal Hill, I thought, was going to just run through him, and he was able to, implement his game plan on a very dangerous striker, which we've seen Menafield knock him out. We've seen other guys knock him out. So I think he's got all the potential to keep growing and maybe make, more of a splash at 205. But Gus too, I would love to see old Gus show up, be like, yeah, I'm ready to go. Let's do this. Light heavyweight especially needs old Gus. But is it going to happen? I don't know, man. It's just, this whole thing makes me sad the more I think about it.
Yeah, it's you can only hope, because him going back down to light heavyweight, which that's fascinating. I wouldn't have expected that. It seemed like he was pretty content with the idea of heavyweight, but of course it didn't go his way against Verdum, which I still cannot believe that actually was a fight that did happen. Mm-hmm. How crazy is that? But yeah, for him, if he can beat Paul Craig, he throws himself at least back into the mix a bit, and still having the name does help in that status. So, in theory, if he is to go in here and beat Paul, and then, like you said, having the win over both men competing in the next title fight, those are his last 2 wins, or the guys fighting for the belt next. Pretty nuts. And looked great against both of them. That Glover fight, oh my, maybe his best performance ever. He looked awesome in that one. Yeah, if he could beat Paul, 1 fight away after that, I mean, why not? Of course, there's Brackage and Yuri waiting in the wings. So depending on if those guys fight each other or not, kind of have to see how that plays out. But I wouldn't be surprised, depending on how that plays out, if he gets one of them, which would probably not go well for him. I mean, not especially Yuri, my God. And I love both of them, so I hope that doesn't happen.
I don't want to see Yuri. That's like the last fight I ever want to see is Yuri versus Gustafsson at this point. Unless Gustafsson looks amazing. If he comes back and looks phenomenal, book it. If But no.
Prime Gus versus Yuri. Holy shit.
Yeah.
That'd be insane. But yeah, we have yet to see if he could turn that clock back. And let's see, how old is he right now? He is 34, so actually still relatively younger than for how long he's been around. And he did join the UFC, when he was very young. He's 2009. Crazy that it's just such a weird career, isn't it? Gustafsson's career has been just crazy. But as for Paul Craig, though, another little fun fact is I didn't realize he alternated performance of the night bonuses in like each of his last, what is this, 8 fights or so. So he's not due for a performance next, but he could still win. We'll see.
That's some shitty MMA analysis stuff.
Oh
right
yes,
there
you go.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So,
that's true.
To that program. So very mixed feelings. I'm very curious to see. I'm just mostly curious to see how Gustafsson comes back and looks at this stage. I definitely no hopes up. I'm in the same boat with Luke as I am Gus, 2 of my favorites right there, and really not sure where they stand. Feeling a little bit better about knowing where Luke does. Got a face palm out of him.
Why in the world? No, just thinking about it, I would say, why in the world did they not book Luke versus Gus? Somebody.
Yeah, that one was right there. And they talked about it too. At least Luke did.
Yes. Yeah.
That was the one to go with instead of Blachowicz. But here we are. Paul Craig.
Here we are. Paul Craig versus Gus. All right. Let us know your thoughts on this matchup. Are you excited to see Gustafsson back? Are you like us where you're worried this is just going to be sad to watch? Does this matchup make sense for both men in your eyes? Do you think that Paul Craig should have gotten a ranked opponent or that Gustafsson should have got a bigger name? What's your thoughts on this entire announcement that, again, none of us expected? The UFC is doing that a lot lately, so props to them for keeping us on our toes. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, bell notification. And yeah, let us, I think both of us could agree, let us hope that the Mauler shows up and not the, sloppily taken down, submitted by Verdum Gus shows up, because Big Gus is a no-go for me. That's
the crawler.